Hello and welcome to another episode of the Health Bridge podcast. I'm your host, Holly B. Today I have Kaylor Betts on the program. Kaylor is a powerhouse life and business coach. He is also my business coach. He is a no BS truth teller and the unapologetic voice behind the top 1% podcast, Awake and Winning. He's built a movement by challenging the status quo, pushing people to think critically, take radical responsibility, and reclaim their sovereignty in a world that wants to keep them controlled. But Kaylor wasn't always winning. He knows firsthand what it's like to feel trapped, burdened by fatigue, illness, financial struggle, and a system designed to keep people small and obedient. Instead of accepting it, he broke free, rebuilt his body and mind, and created a thriving business on his own terms. Now he's on a mission to help others do the same. Through hard-hitting coaching, unfiltered conversations, and real-world strategies, Kaylor gives people the tools to break out of the matrix and to build a life where they win in body, mind, home, and business, all on their own terms. He believes in living ungovernable, free from the limitations imposed by broken systems, outdated beliefs, and self-imposed barriers. Kaylor was one of the first guests that I had on my podcast, and he has been instrumental in helping me create and grow this coaching business as well as start this podcast. And so I'm really excited to bring his much more unfiltered view to this podcast, to my audience, and really dive deep onto a lot of the mindset aspect behind health journeys and behind getting out of just this perpetual situations that we get stuck in. Growth is uncomfortable. Healing is uncomfortable. It's a scary place to go, right? It's a scary thing to take on. Sometimes we need a little push. Sometimes we need a huge kick in the pants to start that process. But in my experience and in Kaylor's, starting with recognizing the beliefs that are keeping us stuck or keeping us in the situation that we don't want to be in, that is where the trajectory of change begins. And so we are going to really, really dive deep on what mindset looks like. What is manifestation? What are certain patterns that are holding us back? And how do we start to question those things? How do we start to unravel and unpeel the layers of those onions? And how do we begin to move forward and change the trajectory of our lives? How do we actually start to manifest some of the things that we think we want, but are we really acting in a way that can take us to that next level, whether that's within your health journey, your business journey, your relationships? This is a really powerful conversation for anybody that is stuck and wants to move forward, especially in their autoimmune journey, but again, in really any aspect of life. So with that being said, let's dive right into my conversation with Kaylor. The one and only Kaylor Betts. Kaylor, I have to start out by giving you a hard time here.
Uh-oh. I'm used to it by now.
Kaylor, you were in my city again. You didn't call me. You didn't text me. I had a whole day planned out, Kaylor. I was going to take you down to Black's Beach where you could sun your balls freely. We were going to go to cryo, maybe do a little sauna action,
That
hit
sounds
up some
amazing.
ribeye steaks afterwards.
That sounds amazing. You know what? Look, I'm such a tumbleweed in the wind. Like, it's so funny because I knew that all I knew is I had to go to Orange County because I was on a podcast. And, it's funny because like if you would have said I'd be in San Diego, I'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds about right. But I wouldn't have had any plans for it. And it was just like literally the day before going to Orange County, having to be there, being like, let's go to San Diego. And then I'm there for like 2, 3 days. and I'm just in my hotel room working, doing podcasts and whatnot. And by the way, Black's Beach is amazing. I love that place. But I didn't even get a chance to do anything in San Diego. I even have a spa there that I like, and I didn't even get a chance to go there. I didn't go to Black's Beach. I literally even stopped in Encinitas because I'm like, I want to go to Encinitas. It seems like such a cool place. I literally just drove through it and just like took a little bit in from the beach because it's a beautiful place, but I didn't even get to spend some time there. So I'm sorry to let you down. Yeah, there's just, man, life is, I don't know, maybe we'll get into this. Life is, like very beautifully and profoundly overwhelming, right now. It's just like, it's so jam packed. I'm so well scheduled and there's so many things going on. And, I embrace it because it's like I asked for that, although it can be overwhelming sometimes. It's also a beautiful thing.
Well, I forgive you.
Thank you. That's very honorable of you.
And yeah, life definitely throws a lot at us for sure. My schedule is a bit hectic as well. Um, and that's actually something that I do want to dive into with you is this idea of self-governance that you talk about a lot, and really becoming an authority in your own life. And for my audience, of course, I want to tweak that a little bit towards the autoimmune community and people that are struggling and on their health journeys. But I think to back up just a little, for those that don't know you, your brand name is Awaken Winning. And I think at first that might sound just like, oh, that's kind of a catchy brand name without thinking much of it. But there's really a lot more depth that goes into that um, title. And I think it comes from a lot of the struggles that you have gone through in your mental health journey and your physical health journey. And to me, I think what I see is really learning how Awaken Winning encompasses really learning how to like live full out, live consciously, live with awareness in all aspects of your life. But I'd love to kind of start there and like you can dive into that and let's set the stage for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that I'm speaking through the lens of realizing I'm talking to an audience of people who want to, overcome, manage, and or put their autoimmune ailments into remission. Which, by the way, is part of my story. My autoimmune conditions were psoriasis and eczema. So, they weren't life threatening, but certainly were very much something that when I was experiencing them were very much a disservice to my life. And also manifested into so many other things, right? And it all was rooted in like, my gut health and whatnot. But here's the thing, let's take a step back. I think this is just so important for, gaining the understanding of what actually helps and supports us on the journey of overcoming an autoimmune disorder. And that is that before we talk about all the strategies and before we talk about the elimination diet and protocol, before we talk about the sleep, before we talk about the frequency that you operate into and the light in the eyes in the morning and regulating your circadian rhythm and drinking clean water and removing all the toxins from your environment, da 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 da. All of those things matter, absolutely. But the first thing you have to do is wake up. And that is what Awaken Winning is really, foundationally. That's what the purpose is of that brand. That's what the message is you got to wake up. And I talk about waking up twice in the morning. Your alarm clock goes off, or maybe you don't use an alarm, but you wake up from your sleep state. But the fact of the reality is most people in society aren't waking up a second time. What does that mean? That means it's not good enough, or at least it won't serve you to only wake up from your sleep state, because most people are just going right into the automatic, unconscious, subconscious conditioned program that they run off of. That's like a computer like program that they're not even aware of, right? So they slip into all of the narratives and the beliefs that we have within the subconscious that create all our thoughts, ideas, actions, and emotions. And by the way, those come from our previous experiences and our environment and everything like that, mostly negative experiences. And this is the problem. And, Peter Crone says something I love. He says, we're not living out our lives, we're living out the narratives in our mind. So these narratives in our mind are what most people are running off of. They don't wake up again and realize that they aren't those stories that they're telling themselves, right? Like that's what you got to do first. You have to wake up and be a conscious being and realize that you're actually the observer of those narratives. Like deep down, if you peel back the layers, you are consciousness, you are spirit, you are a soul, you're loving awareness, conscious awareness, whatever you want to put it. But you got to realize that that's who you are to your core. So you have to be very much the observer of all of the things that are going on in your subconscious and realize that that's not you, and you got to create that separateness. But then you also have to realize that yes, there's lies that were being sold in the external world from people who maybe don't have our best interest at heart. The government, the school system, the mainstream media, da 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 da. The Western medical establishment is a big one for people who are dealing with overcoming their autoimmune. And what I really like to preach, and this is why it's awake and winning, is because being awake is not enough. Once you wake up to the lies that were being sold, you have to then win. You got to do something about it. Okay. So, yes, you have to realize that we're being sold lies by the government and the Western medical establishment and the media and so forth and so on. But to me, winning is to recognize that we're actually selling ourselves more lies than the government is. We're telling ourselves more lies than the government is. So for me, once you really recognize that, then you end up coming to the realization that you hold the fucking keys to your life and to be able to actually make the changes and do what's required to actually heal yourself. So to me, that's like the foundational principle is you got to wake up, you got to realize you're the observer, you got to realize that the body wants to heal and that your true liberation and healing lies in your ability to be the observer and actually respond during your day to do the things that are required to live your highest potential and heal, as opposed to unconsciously react. Again, the difference being response versus reaction. Instead of reacting to all those narratives and stories that you're telling yourself, like, I'm Kaylor and I have anxiety and I have eczema and psoriasis. And it's like, no, I don't to my core. That's something that I manifested. And if I can realize I'm the observer and consciously respond and do what's required, then and what that allows you to do is then remove all the bullshit and remove all the lies. Then you now are in a position where you have the capacity to show up every day and do those things that we talked about: the diet, the sleep, the regulating circadian rhythm, the clean water, the movement, et cetera, et cetera.
So to play devil's advocate, and well, to back up from that, I completely agree with you. Changing my mindset around my health conditions changed my life trajectory. 100% changed my health trajectory. But for somebody that's new to this conversation, to play devil's advocate, they might say, Keeler, I didn't manifest this autoimmune disease. I'm genetically predisposed to it, or I have no control over the fact that I have this thing that I'm dealing with. I just have to learn how to manage it. What would you say to that?
Well, I do believe that we can be pre-genetically disposed to something, but I'll bring up a quote that I love. Francis Collins said that genes hold the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So, like, we also know, and how I would counter that is I would say, okay, so are you saying that everyone that's pre-genetically disposed to an autoimmune suffers from an autoimmune condition? Then why do some people heal their autoimmune that the Western medical establishment told them that wasn't even possible to recover from or put into remission? Why do they end up putting it into remission? Because it started with the belief that it's fucking possible, that they don't have to suffer from that for the rest of their lives. So going back to that quote, yes, I do think your genes play a role. I think some people are way more likely because of their genetic makeup and their biology, they're way more likely to suffer from an autoimmune condition. And yeah, the only question is, are you going to look at yourself as a victim of that and identify as someone who's just like drawn this bad hand? Like, oh, I just like, oh, this is just something I got to suffer from. My doctor told me so. And then I would just say that, like, then why do some people heal? And if you look at what they do, the first thing they do is they believe that is possible. And I know that sounds so like airy fairy and, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya kind of thing. And, it's not all love and light and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I get it. But I would say that, like it's not something you have to be a victim to. And quite frankly, if we are a victim to something, at least if that's how we perceive it, then the way the subconscious works is it literally just wants to confirm its internal beliefs. It just wants to validate its internal beliefs. So if you believe, let's talk money here, because that's sometimes the best example. If you believe, like if you attach to, again, we're not living out our lives, we're living out the narratives in our mind. If you have the narrative, like I'm a $50,000 a year earner, well, then guess what? You're going to put yourself in a position to receive is that $50,000, right? Because really we're only able to take advantage of opportunities and actually see them through and actually execute them to the extent in which we actually tell ourselves we are, right? So I would just point to people who've recovered from it. It's like, well, what do you think? Like, sure, maybe they were genetically disposed as well, but what was the difference? Why did they? Well, they believed that it could happen. They separated themselves from like, this is just something I'm experiencing, but it's not really the real me. I'm going to go out and do what's required to heal it because I also hold the belief and tell myself the story that I can live life without this one day. And you know what? What I would also tell them, Holly, is like, you don't even have to like be 100% convicted that I'm right. But what's the alternative? Like the alternative is to just believe that you're a victim and just stay in it. You may as well take a chance on the possibility that you could have, a life where you're not a victim of this disease. Like pick your hard, choose your hard, option A or option B. To me, it's a no-brainer that you should at least be able to be open to the possibility that you can live without it.
I couldn't agree more. I sympathize with, or I empathize with the many, many, many people that I see on Instagram, on Facebook, who are struggling with this really, really hard thing. And, they're in and out of the hospital, they're on all kinds of meds. And in their Instagram bio, it lists every single one of their many autoimmune diseases that they've been diagnosed with because that is who they are in the world. That's how they see themselves at this moment in the world. And I've been there. So I can recognize that and I can sympathize with that. But when you're claiming those things so strongly, it keeps you in that same state.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, let's take a simple example. Strep throat. That's something that I've been very susceptible to, and I've, kind of had this like chronic strep throat, situation going on, and it's been something that I've had more times than I can count. I mean, let's look at that. So, I mean, unless you're like a crazy anomaly, strep throat in our society, essentially is believed that like it's just something you have. We have a cure for it, okay? Whether it be antibiotics, which I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole. I don't personally take antibiotics for it anymore, although I do go to the doctor and I get them just in case, just to keep my options open. Then I don't take them and I use my remedies to overcome it. And I have done that many, many times. Um, because I actually believe the body can heal. I've proven the body can heal from it without antibiotics. So let's take that. So it starts with we all have the belief that strep throat is something that you don't have to die from in today's world, and that eventually it's just going to be treated. The body's going to do its thing and it's going to go away. But just imagine the alternative. Let's say someone literally held the belief that like once they get strep throat, oh my God, I'm going to die. This is like something then you would never do. I mean, this is the simplest example I can give. You wouldn't do the things that make you heal from it. You wouldn't go out of your way to do all the things, all the remedies that I do because I trust that my body is able to overcome strep throat. But like just imagine if someone held that belief and attached to it really tightly, you wouldn't make the decisions. You would also have the emotional state like you're going to die, Therefore, you kind of would just like that's what would lead your decisions, your behavior, and your actions, and your emotions, and your thoughts, and your ideas. So, like, that's what I'm talking about. It's just like, don't treat your autoimmune like this is like something this is just, oh, I'm just going to live with this for the rest of my life. I would argue that if you hold that belief, that will drive your behavior and your actions and your decisions. And then you aren't even going to waste your time because it would be a waste if you hold that belief to try and get out of it. Right. So like that, like, does that make sense? That to me is the simplest example of like how obvious it is that you should hold the belief that like I can get over this and I'm not going to live with this forever. Now, to speak to your thing, like I know a lot of people say like I'm a lupus warrior or whatever warrior, Crohn's warrior or colitis or whatever the rheumatoid arthritis or whatever. It's like, if, yeah, I just like, to me, there's no benefit and it doesn't serve you to identify to it because like, I don't know how anyone can't see that the stories and the beliefs and the narratives that we have within our self-concept. I don't see how anyone can't understand or see evidence of that.
Really quick, Holly B here. I just wanted to interrupt the podcast to ask you for a quick favor. Can you take just a moment to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are listening in on? It makes a world of a difference. And the reach of this podcast, it takes like literally under 10 seconds. So go do that right now. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And now back to the episode.
That is what we essentially manifest because that's what drives our decisions. Most people aren't multimillionaires because they don't even they're not even open to it. They're like, I'm just not a my parents weren't multimillionaires. No one in my family line was multimillionaires. No one was a multimillionaire. So therefore, they don't even make the decision. They're not even open. They don't even see the opportunities that are right in front of them that they could do over a long enough time horizon that would result in them being a millionaire. I mean, we have teenage kids in Africa who are just going online and becoming multimillionaires, right? Why? Because they identified and started telling them the story like, I could be a multimillionaire here. I see the path. I believe in myself enough. It's not that they don't have self-doubt or anything like that. And then they just fucking make it happen. It's no different with dealing with an autoimmune disorder.
Couldn't agree more. I have had to go through quite a process myself in changing my beliefs around everything. One interesting thing that has come up recently through another podcast guest that I had on my show who owns a genetics insight company. I did my genetics testing with him just out of pure curiosity, found out that while lupus does tend to run in the families, and my mom does have lupus, there was nothing in my genetics to indicate that I was predisposed to lupus. So, what does that tell you? What patterning did I pick up on subconsciously throughout my childhood? Seeing my mom constantly struggling with different health issues around this, myself struggling for years without being able to name something. And finally, I manifested something called a lupus because that was something I could identify with. And to me, that just shows me again, it's a lifestyle, it's subconscious patterning, and we once we recognize these things, then we have the power to overcome them. And I've had several people on my show that have had lupus who have completely gotten rid of all indications of lupus in their blood work, completely cured, completely gone. I believe in that possibility. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm on that path because I believe that it's possible. But until you can wrap your mind around that idea that it is possible, you're going to be stuck. And that's not just around health. I mean, that's around anything in life, like you said, your financial security, your
Well,
relationship status, etc.
yeah, let's talk about it. So, look, I'm not naive to the fact that these are nuanced. It's not as easy as just like, oh, I will think and then I will become. It's not that. There's nuance to this, no question. And I realize I'm oversimplifying it, but like at its core, it is that simple. Who experiences the most heartbreak? Those who deem themselves not worthy of love. Like if you don't believe that and you think that's crazy, I understand, but just open your eyes and look at the people that are experiencing heartbreak over and over again. Look at the people who have that narrative that they tell themselves in their psychology that like as soon as I date, I experience heartbreak. And it really is rooted in largely the stories that they're telling themselves, right? Well, let's just use the example of Sally and she gets her heart broken over and over again. It's like, well, I guarantee you there's some beliefs and some narratives in there. And I'm not saying heartbreak can't happen to someone that, doesn't have these narratives. But again, going back to the subconscious, whatever we believe, whatever are the narratives and the stories that we're telling ourselves, we know this, that the subconscious just wants to validate them in the external world. And the reason why it wants to do that is because it loves the familiar. Because the way your subconscious thinks is it thinks, well, it may not make me happy, but at least I know what I'm going to get. Right? There's also this victim mentality as well, too. So if you identify and you have stories that you're a victim, that's actually really attracting to the subconscious because we get sympathy, right? As soon as we get our heart broken, that actually gives you love, care, and attention. All your friends, all the people around you, in most scenarios, will come closer to you and they will give you sympathy and they will affirm to you that you're like, oh my God, you're so beautiful, like this, that, and the other thing. So we got to be aware of these subconscious initiatives and agendas that we have because that can be it. And I actually interviewed, oh my God, I'm going to draw a blank on his name, but we did an in-person podcast in Austin and he talked about his cancer journey. And I asked him, I said, what was it like when you got the diagnosis of cancer? And he goes, it was a relief. And I said, what? What do you mean it was a relief? He goes, I was so broken and hurt and so starving for attention that it was my cancer that gave me more love, care, and attention from the people around me than any other time in my life. And that was very validating for me, right? So I could weaponize cancer and use it as a way in which people would give me what I ultimately want more than anything, which is to just be loved, right? So, that's another factor as well too. To simplify it so that people don't get too confused here. Look, I've studied this for like over a decade and like there's lots to it. At the end of the day, again, just go back to make sure that you're aware of the story you're telling yourself that I'm a victim to this and I have to live with this forever. And you don't have to there's no magic switch that can just turn that off. You just have to be aware of it. And we as humans have this beautiful ability to make it not if we're aware of it. This is why I say responding instead of reacting. We can actually decide to do the thing that isn't aligned with validating that internal belief. And that's the key. You just have to like tell yourself a different story consciously and then let that drive your decisions and actions. But you got to make your long-term goal, I'm not going to be a victim of this. The girl that's experienced 4 heartbreaks in a row and keeps telling herself she's not worthy of love and men just equal heartbreak, she can still have those narratives and she can see them and say, oh, I've developed the story or the story I tell myself in my head when I think about dating men is this because that's been my experience, but that's not who I am to my core. And I'm going to choose to also start telling myself the truth, which is that it's not that I'm not worthy of love. It's not that all men are going to break my heart. And I'm going to choose to do what's required to actually get what I actually want one day. And then you can make that decision.
That's so powerful. For me, I mean, this is why when I start coaching somebody, this is where I start. We start on recognizing those limiting beliefs, recognizing the negative self talk, those negative stories, those negative beliefs. We start there. We don't go to nutrition, we don't go to hydration, we don't go to circadian rhythm until we've established a pattern of be stopping and responding, like observing the thoughts, responding instead of reacting, observing those patterns as they keep popping up. Where do they keep popping up? What situations do I keep having that repetitive thought of, I'm not enough, or, I'm not worthy of health, I'm not worthy of love, whatever that is? We always start there because, again, for me, that's what started changing everything. And it's not that my health necessarily started changing right away, but it laid the foundation for me to build better health practices because I believed I was worthy of those better health practices and worthy of the outcomes of those things. And then
Yes.
all that stuff starts to actually have an effect on the body. Whereas before, I mean, I was a trained herbalist. I was working with herbs and supplements and vitamins and doing all the things and eating the healthy diet. And it did some, it definitely did some, but there was this point where I just couldn't get past. And that was when I had to address the mindset. And from there, everything started shifting.
We are living out the narratives in our mind. So you got to find the narratives in your mind. What stories are you telling yourself? And it's not even this woo woo thing. It's not even manifestation. I mean, we could talk about what I believe that is because I do believe in it, but I think a lot of people actually, um, I think a lot of people think that manifestation is something different than what it actually is. But it's not a woo woo thing. It's just you're running off a program that has beliefs within it, stories about who you are and how the world works, and that's driving your decisions. Like if you want to if you're not as like deep of a thinker and you're not as spiritual, think of it in that way. It's actually a very just logical thing, right? And you have to understand that the ego loves nothing more than to be a victim. The ego loves to be able to point its finger and say, this is why I'm not where I want to be. The ego loves to be able to point its finger and say, look, everybody, I have this thing that should make you give me more love, care, and attention. Because I think the biggest fear we all have is to not be loved if you go deep enough. And what can an autoimmune disorder do? It can get, it doesn't necessarily get you more love. It doesn't get you more loved, but it will make the people around you give you more affirmation that you are loved. So I know this sounds like a crazy concept, but some people love to hold on to victimhood because it's literally the thing they can weaponize. It's their way of coping with them not feeling like they're loved or worthy enough. So, well, maybe if I have this thing that makes everyone affirm to me all day long that I am loved, then maybe that will work. And sometimes subconsciously we hold on to victimhood. Therefore, we hold on to diseases or especially something like an autoimmune, which, and I know some autoimmune diseases do kill people, but let's be honest, in most cases, they are just a very immense inconvenience to varying degrees. So, especially something like an autoimmune, where someone might get to a point where they believe, okay, this isn't going to kill me. So, therefore, I don't have to worry about the death part, but it's still something I can hold on to that's going to really get people validating me all day long or, in my life. And yeah, it's a thing you have to be very aware of. Victimhood is a very dangerous thing.
So, not only victimhood, but let's talk about in relation to autoimmunity, the way perfectionism plays out. To me, something that I've identified for myself, a there's a lot of perfectionist stuff going on in the background. I didn't even become aware of that until uh, maybe a couple of years ago, actually through somebody in our coaching program, Kayla, who is a perfectionism coach. She brought that to my attention. And then I started identifying, oh my gosh, throughout the years, I have had these perfectionist tendencies. And what does that lead to? Well, that leads to feelings of not being enough in the background of that. And I have realized this year my mantra is I am enough. It's I am worthy because I'm realizing that there are still layers of that onion that I have not unpeeled yet. and I'm still diving deeper, but it's something that I've seen now and recognized largely in the autoimmune community of these deep feelings of not being worthy, not being enough. And we have a tendency to spread ourselves too thin, especially as women, at least, in taking care of everybody else first, making sure everybody else is happy, safe, loved, fed, put to bed. And then we can worry about ourselves with the, 5 minutes left in our day. And consistently doing that over time, I believe, is a root cause of autoimmunity. And I think that you've shared quite a bit about perfectionism and how it's held you back in the past. How have you worked on that within yourself and overcoming those habits?
Yeah. So look, perfectionism, uh, feeling not enough is not what perfectionism leads to. So perfectionism doesn't lead to not feeling like enough. Perfectionism is the way of coping with feelings of not being enough. So let's talk about what perfectionism really is at its core. People misunderstand this. A lot of people think they're a perfectionist when they're not, or they think they're not a perfectionist when they are. Because it's not I think a lot of people associate it with, well, I do everything perfectly. Okay, that is not perfectionism. Perfectionism is a way of coping, again, with feelings of not being enough. So, what it really is it's like, well, for that in which is in my control, I am going to do things that are going to be subject to judgment and criticism in a way that is perfect so that maybe then I'll rid myself of judgment, criticism, and shame. Okay. So, anything now, a lot of people will tell me like, no, I'm not a perfectionist because like my car is really dirty and it's not perfect. And it's like, okay, but then you still could be a perfectionist because maybe you're not having a lot of people come in your car. Maybe you don't deem that as something as like at risk of being judged and criticized and feeling shame about, right? Because what ends up happening is we pick and choose these things in these areas in which we want to be perfect and show up so that we can rid ourselves from the judgment and criticism for others. And then other aspects of our life fall apart because we know perfect is not an attainable goal. You end up just spreading yourself too thin, and then every other aspect falls apart. Now, someone might say, well, like, how can we be a perfectionist and then also be like attached to the idea of like, keeping our autoimmune, right? If you're a perfectionist, wouldn't you want to like just go to the nth degree to like rid yourself of autoimmune? Well, yeah, here's where it gets a little complicated. Maybe some perfectionists would, but what we're really trying to do is rid ourselves of judgment, criticism, and shame. So think about that. If you have an autoimmune disorder, it could be the thing that makes the people around you not judge you, not criticize you, and not shame you as much. Because again, it goes back to the victim thing. So it's like it could be actually the thing that, one of the things that a lot of people who get a disease will say, and this goes back to my conversation with the guy who had cancer, is they'll say, people started to treat me better. People started to be more kind to me. People started to validate me more. So if perfectionism is just the way in which we cope with feelings of not being enough, and it's our way of ridding ourselves of judgment, criticism, and shame, we're literally kind of willing at that point, if it's strong enough, to do anything that rids ourselves of those things. A disease can do that. Therefore, you can subconsciously actually sabotage and keep yourself in the disease just so you cannot feel as much judgment, criticism, and shame from those around you. I hope that makes sense. So, um, what people often fall into when it comes to perfectionism is it's more so just I'll give one example. Like when you have people over, this is where I can get, a little perfectionistic is like if I have people over, like I will perfect everything to a point where it's like, okay, Kaylor, they don't care how fucking clean this part of your house. Like, yes, you should have your house clean for sure. It's gotta, be tasteful when people walk in. But like you're now overly perfecting because the narrative in your mind is like, Either if I don't perfect this, I'll get judged, shamed, and criticized. Or maybe if I do perfect this, maybe then I'll get validated as someone who's perfect and I'll get more love, care, and attention. You know, the other really big example, and you know this well, is like putting out content. You know, that's where perfectionists really struggle. And I have for sure because I come from perfectionism and I have perfectionistic tendencies. So it's like putting out a piece of content, I can overthink that like crazy. And it's not rooted in reality and truth because like people don't really care how perfect my video is. I care about that because of the motives that we've already talked about. They just want to know, are they saying something that can bring me value or help me? That's it. So, you know, that's kind of the role of where perfectionism can be correlated with not serving your illness is like you got to understand why we're perfectionistic. It is rooted in a fear of being judged, criticized, and shamed. And sometimes a disease or an ailment can be the thing that does that.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here and interrupt the program for just a hot minute. You know that I'm so passionate about this podcast, but what I'm also really passionate about is helping women with lupus minimize their symptoms, boost their energy so that they can indulge in life again. So if you are a woman who is struggling with lupus, who is sick and tired of being sick and tired, who's struggling to manage your flares, if you're finding that your lupus symptoms are just really getting in the way of you being able to live your life the way you want to, I feel you. I've been there myself and I felt the same way. And what I've found is that there are a certain set of health fundamentals that once applied, will support you in your foundational health. They will support you in building and maintaining that energy, minimizing flares, and allowing you to, again, indulge in life and follow your passions. So, if that is something that you are interested in creating for yourself, let's jump on a call together. I will walk you through the process that I use with my clients to get them from sick and tired to strong foundation of health by implementing my health bridge protocol. If this is something you're interested in chatting more about, I would love to talk to you. Apply for a free clarity call with me, and I look forward to getting to know you soon. And now back to the episode. I did a post this morning about training your algorithm. I've been seeing so many people post about how social media just ruins their mental health and puts them into burnout mode. And so I did a post saying, actually, the algorithm works for you. You can train the algorithm. It's just trying to please you. It's just trying to give you more of what it thinks is making you happy. And what it thinks is making you happy is what you are dwelling on, basically. So, what are you clicking on? What are you commenting on? It's going to bring you more of that. And your nervous system is kind of the same way, if you think about it. It's trying to keep you safe. If that safety is deemed to being sick, to continue the narrative of having other people, pour out more love and affection towards you or more attention towards you, it's going to keep you in that space, right? Or it's going to continue those narrative beliefs that keep spinning in your head over and over because that's where it finds safety. It's also makes me think of, when they say when you're training a puppy, to the puppy, any attention is positive attention, even if it's negative attention, right? So even if you're getting mad at the puppy, you're still giving the puppy attention. So the puppy's going to be like, oh, that works. That's again like the nervous system. So I think, you know, it's so important to start recognizing those patterns. So that comes back to the awareness of just taking that breath and taking a step back of like, what's lying underneath of all this, and just being willing to open that question and have that question and consider that there is something else going on deeper in your psyche, deeper rooted in that nervous system. That's again, I think that's where everything starts.
And the deeply rooted thing is being loved.
Hmm.
If you go deep enough, that's really what we all have a fear of, is just not being loved. So your puppy example is a good one. By the way, it's the same for kids. Why do kids act out sometimes? Because all they want is attention and they want an affirmation that they're loved. And sometimes it sounds crazy, but it's to act out because it's the only way in which they know how to get attention from their caregivers. So think about it. It's the same thing. What you just said there is really profound. The dog or the kid will sometimes act out even if they get negative attention, or they'll just do anything to get the attention. A disease is no different. We have to really be careful in that. And whether it's perfectionism, the fear of being judged and criticized, shame, like all of it is rooted in the fear of not being loved enough. So you just have to understand that, like, you might be sabotaging your healing of your, you know, autoimmune, or like whether you want to become the millionaire or whether you want true love, whatever it is, you will sabotage because you got to understand the intention and the main priority of the system and the condition program that you run off of is to just be loved. And guess what? Sometimes it's when we do the right things. Like, you don't become a multimillionaire, you don't heal your autoimmune, and you don't even, this is very like counterintuitive, but you don't even, when you fall in love, you don't even, that's sometimes actually the thing that will make you feel less loved. Especially like money is a really good example. The more money you make, the less you start to hear from people because they just think that you're good, right? But then there's also the aspect of now people get envious and jealous. So then they start to criticize you and shame you. Like, I've experienced that as I've made more money, as I've become more successful. Some people can't handle that because it's actually a direct reflection of what they're not doing in their lives. So you have to go against your instincts. My instincts was always to stay in sickness, to stay broke, to stay fat and weak and tired. Okay. My instincts will tell me that because, first off, I have deep seated beliefs that that's just what I'm worthy of. And I didn't really have this strong conviction that I was worthy of an alternative. But then also, again, if you want affirmation and validation from the people around you, that's actually, like, again, counterintuitively, it's usually the best way to get it is to be someone who is inferior, not a threat, and is things aren't going your way, right? Because then the people that love and care about you will give you more attention, just like the kid who's going to act out just to get attention. It's the same thing, right? And yes, if you go and you actually heal, you make the money, you get the love, you're going to get judged and criticized. People aren't going to reach out as much because they think you're good. Everything's good with Sally. Everything's good with Kaylor. So that's really what you have to do, is you have to choose to respond in a way that is for you and your highest potential. And yes, the cost of entry is now you've stepped into the arena. And yes, it is the price you will have to pay. You will get more judged and criticized, which is the thing that we're the most afraid of because deep down we're just afraid of not being loved. And those things are counter to that.
Vulnerability, the willingness to be vulnerable, I should say, in this process is also hugely important. Being vulnerable and being uncomfortable, I think, are two key elements that are ones that we typically want to avoid, right? Because it's scary. It's scary to be vulnerable. It's scary to be uncomfortable. Again, the nervous system is like, no, 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 don't go there. You know, your subconscious programming, nope, nope, that's dangerous toward territory. But how, how have you embraced vulnerability, I guess, in the process of healing yourself and getting yourself to where you are now? Because I think that maybe somebody that's just starting into this healing journey of theirs and just starting to be open to this conversation might be like, I don't even know where to start.
Well, the unwillingness to be vulnerable is perfectionism, if you think about it. Like,
Mhm.
if you struggle to be vulnerable, what that is it's struggling to show where you're not perfect, right? So it's the struggle to show who you really are and to show all your flaws and shortcomings. So let's unpack that. Why is that important to do that? Well, there's a healthy and an unhealthy amount of everything, because some people are really good at being vulnerable, but it's actually because they're using it, again, they're weaponizing it as a way to cope with their feelings of not being loved. So, you've heard of like oversharing, and we all know the person that plays victim, they don't have a difficult time being vulnerable. Okay. So what they're doing is they're using vulnerability to get love, care, and attention. So you don't want to be there, but then you also don't want to be on the other side where it's like, I'm going to hide every single shortcoming and flaw that I have, and I'm not going to give it to the world because then I might be judged, criticized, and shamed. It's kind of like, attachment styles. There's anxious and avoidant. Most people don't know this. So just in case someone doesn't know what that is, we all excuse me, we all have attachment styles. So in relationship, when things get volatile, when a relationship is on the rocks, when it's not doing so well, when there's volatility, people have two different responses. They're either, well, three. One is secure, that's where we want to be. So a normal human reaction to it or response. But some people get anxious and they actually get like more attached. And then some people avoid. They just like completely avoid the situation and they convince themselves they don't need this person and they go in the other direction. What most people don't know is that those two things are rooted in the same fear. Both people, whether they anxiously get attached or they avoid and run away, are actually suffering from the same fear. It's to not be loved. Their fear is abandonment. Okay. But they just have different ways of coping. So this is really important. It's the same thing with vulnerability. Everyone has a fear to some degree of not being loved. Some people choose to be over vulnerable, and because that just aligns with more of their conditioning, their personality, they actually use vulnerability to overshare and play victim so that they'll get love, care, and attention. Some people hide all their vulnerabilities and don't show the world who they truly are, so that in an attempt to come across as perfect, so that they'll get love, care, and attention. It's different ways of coping, but it's rooted in the same thing. What I believe we want to strike is a harmony between the two. That to me is what a healthy amount of vulnerability is. So we have on the one spectrum, it's not healthy to only show vulnerability all the time. That now steps into the territory of victimhood. It's also not healthy to never show vulnerability and, like sit in this, you know, um, state where it's like you're just trying to hide all your shortcomings and flaws. That's like very unhealthy and it's like very taxing. So yeah, you want to be somewhere in the middle. Um, Meaning you need to have a willingness to be vulnerable enough, but not so vulnerable that now you're living in that state constantly. Now, that's tricky, right? And I'm not saying there's a formula. How I approach it is when I am vulnerable, I do, and this is more of my masculine mind, but I do like to focus on it being productive. So I kind of my proxy is, does it lead me to more clarity to know how I how I resolve what I'm being vulnerable about. So my intention with being vulnerable is, I know you have to feel it to heal it. So it's okay to just be vulnerable and just cry. Like I cried on a podcast not too long ago and I put the clip out. I knew she was going to chop that up and put it on Instagram. And not surprisingly, she did. That was me being vulnerable. So how it helped me resolve is sometimes I just have to go through that. Crying is healthy. It's good to be seen for who you truly are and practice being seen for who you are and get over the fear of judgment and criticism. But I also don't want to get like stuck in that perpetually, because you could just be using it as a way to get that love, care, and attention, like we talked about. So for me, I just always love to be vulnerable as a practice to resolve, the pain and the shortcomings and flaws that I'm experiencing. And I hope that makes sense. You don't have to overthink it. It's just more so about your intention with it.
Yeah, being vulnerable in the sense of being open to questioning your beliefs about yourself, in the sense of being open to questioning, why do I believe this to be true about myself? Why have I stepped into this pattern? Why have I manifested this thing in my life? I think that type of vulnerability just starts with yourself.
Mm.
It doesn't even necessarily have to spill out yet into your friends and family and the situations around you. I think it's important to just be willing to do that with yourself, because if we are so closed up and our, heart chakra is so closed up to being able to have that loving relationship with yourself in order to open up those questions, I think the vulnerability will be that sort of incorrect type on the outside. So we have
Yeah,
to kind of
unhealthy.
nurture that within
The one of
ourselves.
one of the best examples that I can use, because people listening are probably like, "Hey, I don't." We all want a formula of like how much vulnerability is healthy. The way I look at it is, let's take work for example. Like we both build businesses, and you know, it's a tricky harmony to strike between if all you do is work, then that's not going to be healthy. And trust me, I'm all about the work. Like I'm like a pound the pavement, no one cares, work hard kind of guy. But if I only perpetually work nonstop, I'm eventually going to burn out and that's going to be unhealthy. But if all I do is sit around and, again, hold hands and sing kumbaya and meditate all day, well, that's not going to build my business. So how do I look at it? I look at it as like you're driving across the country and you got to get from one end to the other. You don't really feel guilty when you stop at the gas station and you refuel. Now, if you were obsessive about refueling and you stopped at every single gas station, well, then you're not efficiently getting to where you want to get to. So you have to come up with and tune in and have enough intuition to know when your tank is getting empty. And the way I look at vulnerability is in the same way. It's like I just kind of tap in and I just have an intuition about when I need to open up and be seen for who I truly am and share something vulnerable. And there's no like perfect balance. And I don't ever know what the perfect amount is, but I just kind of tap in and I just have this sense of like, yeah, you know what? It is time to open up and share or whatever. And then just do it, go all in with it, be seen for who you truly are, and then get back to fucking work. I mean, to me, that's the best way to approach it.
Taylor, I know that we are just about out of time, and there's like so much more that I wish we had time to get into here. But just to kind of wrap this all up, what do you wish you would have known when you were stuck in that place before you started? What would your current self tell that old Kaylor?
I would say that everything's going to be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's just not the end. So long as you are committed to seeing the unhealthy narratives that aren't serving you and being willing to respond in a counter way to them, respond in a way that more so aligns with your long-term values and commitments instead of just reacting to all of your narratives, unhealthy narratives, and your emotions. As long as you're doing that, like as long as you're willing to show up and do what's required. And again, you got to stop at the gas station sometimes. So I'm not saying just perpetually be in work mode, but as long as I'm doing that, then everything's going to be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. That's what I would say.
I love that. Kaylor, where can everybody find you?
I would say well, three places. You can go to at the Kaylor Betts on Instagram. I'll just leave it there at the Kaylor Betts on Instagram. I was going to give another Instagram account. You can go to Awaken Winning as well too. That's our branded Instagram account. But if you liked what I talked about, you can check out the Awaken Winning podcast as well too. And that's not Awaken Winning; it's Awake and Winning. That's a mistake I've noticed a lot of people are making when I say that.
Well, I have been working with you for years. I've seen you go through a ton of growth in the last 5 years, and it's just been a pleasure to sort of watch along and be along with that journey with you. And I really appreciate you coming on here and chatting with our listeners and sharing your experience and your wisdom.
Thank you so much, Holly. I'd say the same thing about you. It's been a pleasure to just watch the evolution that is Holly and just keep going because honestly, I just believe in compound interest. That to me, Albert Einstein said it was the most powerful force on earth. You just keep showing up. I'll leave you with a quote. Denzel Washington said his mom used to tell him this: if you hang around the barber shop long enough, sooner or later you're going to get a haircut. So everyone just needs to keep going, whether it's autoimmune, whether it's a business, whether it's whatever. I know that's such a cliche thing for a coach to say, but it's fucking true.
It is true. It is true. And the compound interest is real. It's happening.
It is. Yes. Keep going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kaylor.
Thank you.
So, to wrap up this conversation, I want to bring this back to something that Kaylor said in the very beginning of the podcast. He said, we are actually selling ourselves more lies than any outside sources, way more than the government, than Western medicine, than the friends and family around us, than the establishment. We are doing it to ourselves. So if we want something in our life to change, to shift, we need to start by identifying the lies that we are selling to ourselves. So are you selling yourself on the lie that your chronic illness is forever? Are you selling yourself on the lie that you aren't worthy of healing your lupus condition? That you aren't worthy of healing your symptoms and going into remission? Are you selling yourself on the lie that you just aren't meant for a loving relationship, or that you are meant to stay stuck in the hamster wheel of life, never being able to crawl out and create something of your own to sustain you? What are those lies? Big ones, little ones, we have them all. And again, that is where the healing starts. That is where the growth starts. It starts by finding those limiting beliefs, finding the lies that we tell ourselves, and being open to changing them. I know that you got a ton out of this episode, out of this conversation with Kaylor. Please listen to Kaylor's podcast as well, Awakened Winning. He has incredible guests on there. Follow him on Instagram. And please take a moment to like and subscribe to this podcast. Leave a comment, share this episode with someone that you think would benefit from this message, because that is how we grow. We are scrappy around here and we need all the help that we can get to get these messages out there, because they are so important and people need to hear these conversations. So if you are struggling with autoimmune symptoms, whether you have a diagnosis or not, and you are ready to take a deeper look at what may be contributing to that and what might be holding you back from shifting your health journey for the better, let's jump on a call. I would love to hear about what you were struggling with, and let's get you some real tools and takeaways that you can start implementing right away to begin shifting that journey. The link to apply for a call is in the show notes, and I really look forward to connecting with you. Thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Health Bridge podcast, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode.